This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 432 for Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. Joining me this week is Brockett Vola, the cat Volver on all the social media that matters. Welcome back, my friend.
Welcome to 2022. It's almost the end of February, too, by the way.
I feel like your MO for starting the show is like just the most subdued sort of like it's because it's really interesting because as a podcaster and as a co-host, I find you have some of the higher energy of the people that I talk to.
Oh, absolutely. I that's why it was funny that you called me out on being subdued. I lure all your poor listeners in with this sense of like, oh, he's going to be a very chill American. And then by the end, they're like, oh, no, he's terrible. He lives in Texas now.
He lives in Texas now. It's worse.
It's worse.
How is Texas, by the way?
It's all right. We literally had, my second daughter's first birthday was last week.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Happy birthday.
No, you're good. But what's ironic is, so she's a February birthday. When she was born in Chicago, it snowed that day, obviously, as it would. We're here the weekend before her birthday, so the last weekend of January, 70s, gorgeous, perfect day outside. Like a great fall day, perfect, sunny, a little bit of wind, whatever. Throughout, then like 2 days later, we had snow on the ground in Texas. Not a lot, but like at least like an inch. Enough that the girls could go out and experience snow in Texas. 2 days later, snow all gone. And yesterday we were at 70. So it's crazy. As my wife and I would say, having lived in Chicago for, a decade plus, it was nice to have the snow for a day and then it just goes away. Like, it's really cute that way. Like, yes, it created a lot of like slushiness and stuff, but we didn't have to shovel and, it's gone. The girls got fun and then it's done. And now we're kind of waffling in the 50s, 60s right now. But yeah, it's quite different. I would say weather. That's the other thing is your listeners are like, oh, he comes in so hard, subdued, talks about weather. I'm so lulled. I'm about to fall asleep. And then he starts screaming madly about some kind of ironic character arc thing later in the episode. But yeah, no, it's been nice. Having a single family home during these times is very nice. Having this amount of space is nice.
I remember, I think it was a social media post. I don't know whether it was you or your wife that posted it, but it was like something along the lines of like first Christmas in the new home, or like, I have a lawn now that I can put Christmas decorations up. I remember thinking like, that's a fun moment of like the first time you're like, I've never had to worry about how to decorate my house for Christmas before,
right.
Like the outside of it, because you're in a community where you've got that. So, and it looks like a cute place, man. I think I've seen a couple of shots online.
Thanks.
It's fun. Yeah, no. And congrats. Like that's a great step. And I agree, because as someone that lives in an apartment building during the pandemic, I mean, on one hand, working from home and the things that are afforded me in my career has been great. I was just speaking with someone about this last night. Like I don't want to belittle the experience of anybody that has had a very hard time with the pandemic, that maybe has lost a job or had to switch jobs, or has to deal with like homeschooling kids and stuff like that. Like, I am by myself. I work for myself. I set my own hours, and I've been doing this long before the pandemic. So ultimately, my work ended up increasing over the course of the last 2 years. But it has also meant like increased time alone, which has been easy to come by, because like, again, I don't, outside of like neighbors in the building, I don't really have to deal with anybody. And it's not like neighbors in a community, like it's not that kind of building for me. So like, I say hi to people, but like I walk past as I get my mail, and I'm either, if I'm going out for groceries, I'm just gone, like I'm out and I'm back, like I remember 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I had borrowed my father's car to run some errands. I needed to go all over the map. And between picking up the car and dropping off the car, I think it was about, like, after I did that, I remembered like dropping off the car to dad on a Friday. And the following moment that I left the apartment was like 10 or 12 days later. Like it was into the
Uh,
following week. Like I went for groceries on Tuesday, a week later. I was just like, I was unlocking the front door going like, I don't think I've left the like, I'm sure I took out the trash or something nominal, but like I hadn't actually left the building because I had like outdoor clothes on. Like if I take out the trash, I'm in like, flip flops and sweats,
yeah, yeah.
even in wintertime because I'm Canadian. Uh, but like to go to the grocery store, like I'm like, I'm dressed up with like hoodie and toque and mitts and whatever. And I was just like, I don't remember the last time I left the building. And I did the math in my head. It's like, wow, that's a little bananas, Now I've been talking to people. I've been talking to people like you or Lou or whoever on podcasts, but I hadn't gone out. It was weird just to realize that. I mean, it's winter. Like there's talk about weather. We had a 10-degree day on Saturday last. That's 50 for you Americans. 24 hours later, it was -10. So that's like 10 degrees for you Americans. And there was 8 centimeters of snow on the ground. So it
Oh boy.
dropped
Okay.
like
Yeah.
20 to 25 degrees in the space of 24 hours. My head still hurts from,
Yeah.
the temperature shift. But I mean, I don't mind a nice mild winter day. Sometimes late March we'll get nice spring sunshine where you can feel the sun warming up a little bit, but it's scary when it happens in February. Like February when I was in university 20 years ago was nothing but snow and cold. Like there was no respite from it whatsoever. And now we're getting these like roller coaster tides of like, oh, it's actually going to melt and rain today. And then it's going to go back to snow. But like normally this time of year, like -20 for a week straight. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not there anymore. And it doesn't, I'm not one of those people going like, oh, what a beautiful day. I'm thinking like, man, this is scary. Like I don't
It
feel
is.
comfortable, with it. Um, all that is to say, I've been spending a lot of time inside, and I'm curious about this for you. I don't know whether this is an issue because you've got young kids that keep you very busy, but a bit of a first world problem. I have just been feeling like I have too many games or shows or options to choose from when it comes to media consumption. And I've been stuck with this indecision of like looking at Netflix for 30 minutes, even scrolling through YouTube, which is usually bite-sized content, for a long time before even selecting what to watch. A lot of times I just look at a thumbnail and go like, that looks annoying, that looks dumb, I'm not going to watch that. And I never actually pulled the trigger and pressed play on anything. Have you been experiencing this like throughout the winter, throughout like the pandemic after the move?
Yeah. I mean, pull back the curtain pre-show. I mean, I haven't finished Arcane. I've been working through that. Uh, Last time we talked, I was starting Superhero Girls, which is a cute show, and I kind of watch that here and there. But that's more of like it's light enough that I can watch it and then just go to sleep. Like I've been bouncing around between shows. That's the other thing your listeners are like, "Oh God, here it comes." Finish your drink. I revisited Borderlands 2. Uh, um, Borderlands guy's back. Oh God.
So
But
two,
yeah,
not
I
three, huh?
well because it's on my Switch. So the
Oh,
Switch
oh,
is
oh.
basically my like my dream console because I can pause the whole thing. I don't even have to hit the pause button. Like literally in the middle of any game, I could just put it in sleep mode, pick it right back up wherever I'm at,
Oh,
which
cool.
has just been phenomenally more important with my lifestyle. And it's a game that I played before, so I didn't have to focus too much on it. And like you said, there was a bunch of games I was kind of like maybe, 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 and then like while I keep not making a decision, I just play this one instead, and that's been the case for like 2 weeks. So yeah, I agree. Like I keep going, we have access to HBO Max, Netflix, Disney Plus through our cell phone provider. They give us Hulu, and I think and we have Prime Video. So between those 5 services, it's like, okay, oh, and then my father-in-law gave us Paramount Plus, although I don't really watch anything on that, uh but anyway, like between all the services, every once in a while I have this moment where I'm like, I should just like write down the shows I wanted to watch so I can consult that rather than jump around. Cause like you say, you spend all the time you wanted to relax, almost anxiously trying to find the thing to watch or do to relax that you just, I don't know. It just is this weird conflict inside. So I have that quite a bit as well.
So for me, I think part of it with the video games is I've started a lot of stuff, and in a way, it's good because it's things like I mentioned Death's Door on last week's podcast. That's not something I would have purchased on my own. But the
Right.
fact that it's part of Xbox Game Pass, I'm already paying for the Game Pass. I can try it. And the nice thing about it is like, if you don't like it, who cares? You just uninstall it. And a lot of times these indie games are so small, like you don't even bother to uninstall it right away. Like, yeah, I'll leave it on the Xbox for a month and see if I come back to it. For a couple weeks there, when I first got my fingers into Forza Horizon 5, that's all I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't
Right.
watching anything, to the point where I was concerned about talking about shows on this podcast, because it's like I haven't watched anything. Like, every time I sat down after dinner would be just like to play Forza Horizon 5. And but then, like, now it's been 2-3 weeks, I haven't touched it once.
Yeah.
And most of the time, like, I'll sit there and I'll want to play a video game, but I'm just like, I just can't figure out what I want to play. And there's been stuff that I've started that are story based, that are engaging, like the Avengers game, like Battlefront 2 was cool. I'm started and got into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but like I just end up falling off of them because for whatever reason they're not. I don't know whether they're not living up to my expectations or if I just get distracted by something else, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing that has the pressure, the only thing I feel guilty about not playing is Assassin's Creed, because I purchased that. That's not part of Game Pass. I mean, I didn't pay very much for it. I got it on Black Friday, but I got
Right.
the
We
I
talked about that. Yeah.
yeah, I got the physical disc, and so I will eventually return to that because I do enjoy, like, a lot of times I want like a chill experience. So like I'm not going to sit down and play Halo Infinite because I find that that's like really like kind of on the edge of your seat. You have to be engaged in aiming and all that kind of stuff. Where a lot of times, if I want a chill experience, the game that I play is Minecraft. But I play enough
Right.
of that on weekends on my streams, prepping for the Spawn Chunks podcast, that in a way, having the Spawn Chunks podcast is great for my Minecraft play because I will always play Minecraft at least once a week, right?
Hmm.
Even if I decided to stream a couple different games on the weekend for something fun or different, I would still have to at least log one stream day in Minecraft because I'd need to have something to talk about and stay kind of like what I feel is like in tune with the game week to week. And so I'm wondering with like some of the video games and some of the shows, even though I do have this show, this is kind of like a catch-all for whatever we've been enjoying. I don't have like a focused show that's only crime dramas or that's only I mean, we focus on sci-fi and fantasy just because that's what we're into, but like I don't have one show. Like my the Spawn Chunks is about one video game. That's it. We we
Right.
we touch on news for like Minecraft Dungeons, but we really only talk about Minecraft. And for this show, like I don't have a podcast that is just about one particular show. For a while this was about Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones was such a short season, it only dominated like,
Seasonal. Yeah.
it's like 6 or 8 weeks, on, or maybe 10, I guess,
Right.
on the show, and that was it. And the rest of the time we were kind of to our own devices. So I don't have something pushing me to continue on with stuff, and to the point where I've even thought about starting a podcast about, like, books or something that would force me to like consume a specific type of media regularly rather than just sitting there with everything at my fingertips and like waiting to pull the trigger. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an
But then you
interesting.
don't want it to feel like homework. That's the other
No,
thing
it's true too.
we've talked about this topic's come up in general ways before too, is like sometimes when you start a game or you start a TV series and then you look at it and you're like I don't know if you and I have talked about this enough. You've had that moment where you start it and then you make the mistake of looking at how many episodes there are. And if in your brain you see you're on episode 2 and there's 6 more and you're like, "Wow, that's a lot." You already have defeated the interest you have in that show because at no point when we were growing up, if you said that you were watching Lost and that there was only going to be 4 more episodes or something, would you have been like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can hold on that much." Like you
Mm-hmm.
just would have just watched it. You just would have gone with whatever the story was. Like now we have such resources and so such an abundance of stuff. And maybe it's the binge culture that sort of has been, of course, blown up by by Netflix. Even though when you bought physical games, you know, it was always like you could binge and beat the whole thing. But I felt like I used to kind of revisit a video game, and then also, yeah, like you said, maybe had like a graphic novel I would touch on, or a TV show I'd be watching, like change a pace, like trying to have like a something to read, something to watch, something to play. Like always have those levels. Now it's like binge one of those areas or start a binge, lose interest, shiny new object, bounce around, and then you have all this like homework in your head of like, oh, I got to get back to that show, and you're like, but why? But why? I mean, if you like, we last time I was on this show, we talked about Cowboy Bebop, and yes, it got canceled, so that kind of helped. The
Mm-hmm.
live action one got canceled, but I have not come back to it since because in my head I was like, I liked it enough. I liked it, but not enough. And now I'm like literally seeing a bunch of stuff I want to see. And you know, my wife and I finally finished Boba Fett, and it was like that
Nice.
was a show I actively wanted to watch. So why would I put myself in a position to make myself feel guilty or forced to watch something just because I started it? Like we've watched 2 seasons of Lost in Space, have not watched the third yet. Probably will at some point, maybe. I don't know. Like we like those 2 seasons a lot, but there is other things going on that can start to take priority. So some of it is like, yeah, maybe you are dedicated, maybe you're pretty good about like I have a friend who's basically like they wrote a list of the games and they're like, after I beat this game, I'm gonna do this one. Unless I'm not feeling it, then I'll go one more down the list. But I'll kind of stick to that. And it's like, I can't do that. Like I would look at that list and be like, ugh, really? I gotta play that game next? Well, screw you, list. Like, and I love lists. So you know, that like if I'm saying that to the list, man, like you know, like it's some serious like binge culture anxiety going on. So yeah, definitely first world problems to have this amount of content that we really have our fingers on, which is great. But at the same time, it's like, oh my gosh, like you have to curate your own pop culture now. Whereas before it was like there was only one there was only one big, huge pop culture show. It was Lost or it
Right.
was
Yeah,
Game
yeah,
of
yeah.
Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's a million.
There's
Not like a
lots.
million, but there's
Yeah,
yeah.
more than one. Yeah. And I feel too, like right now, I just feel like I don't have access to the big things that I wanted to watch. Like haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home.
Agreed.
Haven't
Same.
seen Dune. I will see Dune. I'm curious to how my consumption is going to change next month because I'm going to be resubscribing to Crave in Canada, which is how I'm going to have access to Picard
HBO.
and the Star Trek and the HBO stuff.
Okay,
And I
okay.
think Dune, it's like mid-March or something. It becomes available on like regular HBO because I did get HBO in November along with Crave because I wanted to catch up on Discovery, Star Trek Discovery, and I wanted to also check out the stuff on HBO that I haven't missed. And I thought that I was going to be able to get access to Dune, not in Canada. So, because HBO on Crave is not HBO Max, it's a different thing.
Okay.
So, so that was frustrating. I mean, I still had plenty to watch. It's fine. But I'm just waiting to see like how that might change. Because right now I'm going through Netflix and like you're lucky if you can find something on Netflix that's been released in the last 2 years. You know, like there's some good movies, but one, I've seen them. Or two, it's just like those are recent releases, but they're of no interest to me because they're horror films or,
Agreed.
you know, they're maybe just a little bit too intense or whatever it happens to be. Like, for example, I tried to get into Terminator Dark Fate. I mean, it was fine. I think I maybe got through the first act, maybe first half of the movie. And it's action packed, like it feels like a Terminator movie, but like it like didn't really get its claws into me to help me keep going. And so, you know, I'm not feeling like there's a lot that's grabbing me. And a lot of the things that I've seen that have been of interest over the last few years have been series. So it's not been films that I've necessarily missed in theaters so much as it's been like, it's been things like The Mandalorian season 1 and Book of Boba Fett. And those are all accessible and I've watched them. So like, it's not like I'm waiting for films to come out on these platforms. However, one thing I have been, I'll say listening to, cause I sort of half watch it. It is a podcast. And I found when I have the indecision about what media to watch, I find interviews are kind of like a good go-to. I'll often kind of like look up recordings of like the Graham Norton show, just like casual conversations with like actors and creators and stuff like that. It's also funny. It's also a funny show. Less scripted and less what's sort of looking like less Dance Monkey Dance than like the Tonight Show or Conan. Like
Yeah, any of yeah, I agree.
I find that Graham Norton's conversations are a lot better, especially because sometimes the guests will turn to one another and ask a question, which I think is really cool.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, no, that's really good. I see thousands of those clips because I probably watch 2 on Facebook, and now
yeah,
Facebook algorithms them to me, but they are engaging, you know?
yeah,
I watched one of Harrison Ford telling Benedict Cumberbatch he really enjoyed his work, and
yes,
Benedict Cumberbatch, like, being like, "Oh my god, I can die now." Like,
yeah,
just those brief clips of worlds colliding, and you're like, "Oh, yeah," and it's always on Graham Norton. I've been like, I should just actually just watch more of his show because I love so many of those clips. They're so
yeah.
cool.
No, that and it's really worth it when you get into like a full episode because then you can get the
Yeah.
chemistry and the in jokes. And if you want a
Yeah.
really fun one, look for any of the Graham Norton shows where he's got the cast of the current Star Wars trilogy on.
Okay.
Because Daisy Ridley is delightful. And Mark Hamill, when he's on, he just is and just bringing all the stories about like Carrie Fisher or Harrison Ford, or like he brings all these really fun moments from the entire saga, right?
Yeah.
And so that's always cool. And they're usually, because the movies came out at Christmas time, they're usually like around a Christmas special, which is even more fun on the Graham Norton show. But that's a bit of a sidebar, also a good recommendation. The other thing that I've been watching is Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. He played Lex Luthor on Smallville, for people that are
Oh,
struggling to
yeah, I
place the
love
name.
Rosenbaum.
Um, I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I did start listening when he first brought it out, and the little asterisk that I put with that review was like, he's a bit hard to take sometimes. He's a little bit overbearing. He kind of talks over his guests sometimes. That I feel he's gotten a lot better with, and I don't know whether it's just experience, whether it's feedback on the show. There's a lot of ads in the show now. He's done very well with it, and I don't know whether because of the ads, he's also dialing back some of the more provocative for the sake of it stuff that he asks his guests.
Yeah.
He tends to lead the guests to water and let them kind of speak, which is I think a better interview technique. Um,
Yeah.
but over the course of 2021, he interviewed a lot of people that he was on Smallville with, because Smallville had their 20th anniversary in 2021. So if you didn't feel old before,
Oh, yeah.
you do now. And it was really cool. I'll have links to the website and the YouTube channel.
Oh, I gotta listen to
Yeah,
those.
there you can listen as a podcast. Because I enjoyed watching Smallville. I did enjoy watching like the Tom Welling interview. I mean, I had it
Yeah,
on
I'm
in the
sure, yeah.
background while I was doing dishes, but it's kind of cool to turn around and like when he says something or they're laughing or whatever, to see someone's smiling face or
Yeah.
the stuff that's happening. And that was really cool because like Tom Welling's a dad now. He's got 2 young boys, and like hearing his perspective shift and all that kind of stuff. It was cool to see that. And also Kristen Crook, who's delightful, and obviously they've all stayed friends, for the most part. I think they keep in touch because they're doing a lot of like press for the 20th anniversary, and
Right,
they've done
and they do
conventions.
cons a
They do
lot, I
cons and stuff
think.
like
Yeah,
that. I mean,
yeah.
pre-pandemic they did more cons. I think
More
they're
cons, yeah, yeah, yeah.
slowly getting back into it. It depends on what country the con is in right now, but yeah, it's worth checking out again if you've fallen off like I have. And the cool thing about it on YouTube, or really any of the podcasts, the name of the guest is usually the title of the show. So if you have no particular interest in that interview, you can just skip it. Like
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
not gonna miss much. So check it out. I mean, Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. It's been a great sort of like, I don't know what to watch, so I'm just gonna listen to 2 people talk. It's not like you're investing anything. There's no plot, like, so if you don't like it, or if you pause the interview and never get back to it, it's not like you're missing, the end of something, you know?
Yeah. Well, you did it, Joel. I've hit weather, Borderlands, and now Smallville's come up. Spoiler, it'll come up again. So I think you've fulfilled all the drinking quotient for my episode already. People are sloshed, so you're good. I mean, we're only like 20 minutes in. We hit all the finest points. I don't know, and you brought up Avengers video games. So really and truly, Joel, I mean, that's it. Bingo card filled. That sounds really cool, though. I love Rosenbaum. He always had a sense of humor that outside of Smallville was so weird to see, because he has so much more energy than that subdued. And again, to toot the Smallville horn, like, I really think he's the best Lex Luthor I've ever seen because he did such a good job of balancing this, like, all these things under the surface. And that's another great, like, quality of somebody like a Chris Evans, where you see him in an interview and he looks like a dude, Boston bro, who's like cutting up with guys. And then he's Captain America. And you watch Michael Rosenbaum in these group settings, and you're like, he is like the nut job. And then he played the most like quiet, subdued, like villainous person on Smallville. It's so ridiculous. Tom Welling is far less verbose than even Clark was. And Clark was very non-verbose. So like Tom Welling is
Yeah.
like even more subdued than his character is. And Mike Rosenbaum is a billion times more animated. So like it's always cool to see some of those people. Um, especially when you like them a lot. But anyway, yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to check it. Inside of You.
Yeah, Inside of You with Michael
Inside
Rosenbaum.
of You.
I
Okay.
think that's the full
Awesome.
title. He has his name in the podcast.
In the
Just
title. Okay.
just because Inside of You, it's a pretty basic title, and I think if you
It
looked
is.
if you
Yeah, I
looked
was
at
thinking
that,
like health podcast. Yeah.
yeah, like if you Googled that, you'd probably get a lot of different results. But
Yeah.
the YouTube channel and stuff will all be linked in our show notes. So what have you been watching since the last time I've had you on the show?
Well, I keep really wanting to talk about the show, and I think I've tagged it in a couple times. I don't know if I've really stumped for it the way I have Gravity Falls in the past, but right now, we had the nerd Mount Rushmore thing a while ago, and sort of more of the Mount Rushmore of animated cartoons specifically for, this is a very long title, Mount Rushmore, animated cartoons specifically for like 11, maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 9 to 15-year-olds. Really, it's for everybody. I mean, the Harry Potter books start off for young children, but my parents all read them. So, like, it starts off at a certain age, but the Mount Rushmore of cartoons for supposedly the ages 7 to 15 has Gravity Falls. I'm staring at a Funko Pop of Dipper Pines literally in front of my eyeballs. But I might have to get a Funko Pop for a character from Owl House. Owl, OWL, in case my garbledness makes that hard to hear. It's a Disney DX show, so it's the same channel that puts out great quality and then cancels them, like Gravity Falls and DuckTales, the new DuckTales, which is also great. But Owl House is really really cool. It's what's great about Gravity Falls was that it leaned really hard into the great sci-fi tropes with a little bit of fantasy, like the Twin Peaks of the world, the Outer Limits, the Twilight Zone, Erie, Indiana, if you're familiar with that show, that sort of stuff. Owl House feels like it just leans more into all the magical, wonderful things of like sci-fi and things without like just stealing a bunch. Like the whole premise is basically this girl, Luz, Luz, um, basically goes into this magical world, and there's this witch who's known as the Owl Lady because she lives in this owl house, um, and basically she Luz like grew up with these stories about this sorceress, so she loves the idea of magic and fantasy. She was kind of an outsider in the real world. She goes to this world of nothing but crazy outsiders, finds the biggest outsider, of course, and the owl lady, Ida, and they become friends. And she becomes friends with her pet sidekick, sort of, King, the king of demons, quote unquote, and Hooty, which is the owl demon that possesses the owl house. And King and Hooty are both voiced by Alex Hirsch, who did Gravity Falls. So there's a lot of fingers in this that I find really interesting as far as the creative people. Dana Terrence, who created the show, if you follow her, and she's just a really good creator, and the show itself is just fascinating. Without spoiling things that happen in the story arcs, they go places with story arcs for a children's show that is better than when we were children and the biggest story arc was like, I want a bike. Am I going to get it? I'll work hard for it. I got a bike. And the lesson was work hard. Like, okay,
Right.
cool. Like, I guess. What about a lesson about like your identity, your, like your place in your social group, like how you identify your own even like romantic interest in these sort of things. And that's all stuff that's kind of explored in this. And they just had the second season's first half come to Disney Plus. So the whole first season's out. It's like about 20 episodes. Second season first half is roughly about 11, and they're about to, I think in March, Dana announced that they're going to start airing on Disney DX the second half of the second season. But we found out last year, I think it was last year, or maybe it was the end of 2020, but like Disney's already pretty much canceled it. They're going to finish the whole series with, I think, 3 44-minute episodes for quote unquote season 3. So there will be a conclusion to the whole thing. So if you're worried about a series that's going to take on, life forever, it's not. But there's a lot of depth to it. It's so interesting. The humor of it really as an adult catches me off guard and I laugh more than I should. Like, and it's not like dirty joke. It's just like it's just fun. It's just funny. It's just funny. And that's nice to watch a show where it's not like, again, pulling back the curtain, we were talking about Vox Machina, all these like manipulated adult humor jokes that are just like, if it doesn't hit you, it's the clunkiest, grossest thing in the world. Whereas these, like, Owl House just has moments where it's like, that's just funny. That's kind of silly. It's funny. It caught me off guard because it was charming and how like effortless that kind of joke was, and the whole world opens up from season 1 to season 2 even more. It's hard. There's a lot of specifics. This show moves, which is great. I love shows that aren't too static. If you picked up an episode of season 2, you would be lost because you didn't watch all of season 1. So it is an important show to start from the very start and go all the way through. But like I said, it's not 500 seasons. It's not even like original run of like Powerpuff Girls, which I keep looking at on Hulu being like, do I want to watch it? Well, there's 100 of them. But yeah, it's really good. I really appreciate the animation, the storytelling, the world building, but most important, and I think this goes for all the cartoons on like my Mount Rushmore, like Gravity Falls, Owl House, Steven Universe, like the characters are so good that you would watch them in an episode where they don't really do anything because they're just really three-dimensional and enjoyable. Now, there are some characters on Owl House that start off kind of one-dimensional, and they're making some efforts in the second season to give some bigger, longer plots that are going to be unraveled for some of them, which is good. If those characters you're already out on, okay, but it's not something that drags the show down because there's a lot of A and B and C plot going on for a kids show that's under 30 minutes. So it's really good. I really, really enjoy it. Highly recommend it. Like if I had to sit down and force Joel to do anything, and I've tried for years, he's tested the Borderlands, he's tested the Avengers, that's fine. But if I had to force him, and it sounds like other people would too, to watch something, it would be Gravity Falls. It's done, so it'd be easy. But that next show, I would be like, whoa, bud, don't get out of the chair yet. It'd be Owl House because it's shorter, it's great. Steven Universe is longer, it's awesome, but it is more of a commitment, even though each episode's like 15 minutes. So really, like, you can blow through a lot of it quickly. But again, it's a longer thing. So if you're talking about all this, it's grabbing my attention. Where am I going? Like Owl House right now, sub 40 episodes, and it won't ever top 50. I don't think. No, I think the math. Yeah, I would say the over under is definitely about 50 episodes, and I think it's definitely going to be under that. So it's really good. I really enjoy it. It's really, really cute. Yeah, there's just a lot of little things I want to like compliment it about, but they're actually kind of story points. But I will say, as a world building thing, that's not really spoilery. The world she ends up on is the Burning Isles, and it's basically the dead carcass of this giant magical giant. So there's like these giant rib bones that are like hovering over parts of the islands, and like they talk about getting like the giant's blood and stuff. And so basically, this giant magical creature died, and from its decaying, it created life and all this magical life around it. And like we haven't really gotten so deep into figuring out what was the deal with the giant. But like, yeah, it's pretty It's pretty good. Little touches and hints here and there just about the world itself are not heavy-handed, and I think they're really engaging if you're into it. If you're just in for the characters, you don't have to worry about being bogged down with like some greater, awesome narrative. Like it's there, but it's not. Like if you weren't into Wheel of Time's like major narrative, to me the characters weren't that interesting to keep you going. Whereas I think the opposite is true of Owl House, where again, like I could just watch these characters just have fun.
So I've watched the trailer, and I immediately know what you mean about offbeat or surprising humor, but not like inappropriate. It's not,
Yeah.
you don't have to be an adult to laugh when she, Luz walks up to a centaur and says like, "Hey, this is so cool." And then instead of his head talking, his nipples are his eyeballs. And it just, my eyes are down here. It's like, what? Like you just don't expect that kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's like a simple 2-second gag. So I don't think it's in the trailer. I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but like,
no, that's yeah.
That alone to me kind of like, okay, I know what kind of show this is. And there's another point when in the trailer, she was cuddling the demon cat or the demon household something. It's a little black thing with a skull face.
Yeah, King. Yeah, he's like a demon cat thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you've seen kind of stuff like this in other media. They've just kind of cartoonified it and cutified it and stuff. And she's like, "Aren't you the cutest?" And he's saying something dry like, "No, I'm a demon. Like I'm terrible and like I am evil incarnate." Like he's kind of like going straight man with it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of stuff is always cool. I enjoy like the mutterings of the straight character, like the straight and narrow character, underneath the whimsical, over the top kind of expressiveness of whoever else is in the scene with them. I've always found that kind of timing and stuff funny. You are the second person to recommend this to me, by the way. Actually, Hannah, a friend of mine, just recommended this last night. So it's weird that you're talking about it on the show today. I had no idea that you were going to bring it up. She said, "Hey, by the way, you should check out the Owl House." I think between the animation and the theme, like of the fantasy kind of magical stuff, she didn't want to give too much away because I think she didn't want to spoil the surprises,
Yeah, exactly.
So she recommended it. So, and I've got access to Disney Plus. Of course, that's where I watch all the Star Wars stuff. So I will have to check it out because it's I do enjoy watching something animated or close to that kind of experience on Saturday morning still. Like when I have pancakes in my brunch on Saturday before I get into my stream on Saturday afternoon, which is Minecraft. And what I usually do is I'll end up watching some of the Let's Plays of Minecraft on YouTube because it kind of gets me into the headspace. It might inspire what I'm going to be doing that afternoon. But it's pretty cartoony. Like it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon. And for a long time, that's kind of what my Saturday mornings were when I was learning to play Minecraft. I was watching a lot of YouTube about Minecraft. But one of my favorite servers that I watch with some of the content creators that I can handle, because sometimes Minecraft content creators are a little bit they aim their content at a younger audience, which demographically and financially is the smart thing to do. But as an adult, sometimes it can be a little bit much to watch. But the ones that are kind of like a little bit more chill, they're taking a break right now. Because they're in between what they call seasons. And so there's not much on my playlist of like stuff I really want to watch. So having something like the Owl House to check out on Saturday mornings, or like the next time I feel like watching something animated will be cool. The style, I'm surprised it looks the way that it does. Like, cause I saw some social media about this a while ago at some point over the last year. I think it was maybe TikTok, but it was like basically people making reference to the Owl House or fan art of the Owl House and stuff like that. And it was artists that were really in love with this show. So like animators that I follow online, people that were probably even involved in it. Like someone might've been doing concept art or something for it and sharing it. And I thought like, oh wow, that's cool. And I thought it was like a little bit more Harry Potter, like a little bit more serious. So I was expecting it to have a little bit more like a Avatar The Last Airbender look, but this has way more of a Gravity Falls. It looks a little bit like some of the poster art that I see on Netflix for things like Centaur World.
Yeah.
I know Centaur World is aimed at a different audience entirely, but it has that simple kind of like cartoon style. Like it's not proportioned people. Like her head is like, huge compared to her torso.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's I haven't really watched much of it, but Amphibia is another one that kind of is in this grouping of stuff. But yeah, the art of them is very
I do start to find that the stuff starts to look the same. Like I'm looking at DuckTales, I'm looking at Amphibia, I'm looking at Gravity Falls, and it's like there's subtle differences in the character designs, but not a heck of a lot.
right. Yeah, I will say, I do think Gravity Falls and the Owl House look a lot alike, and maybe that's also why it's easier for me to palette. Now, the world that they built and the characters in it, obviously, in the content's all very different. But like, yeah, I will say that. Although, yeah, I think unfortunately right now with some cartoons across the spectrum, it's like some of them when it works, like everybody animates that way. Like the kind of way like when Adventure Time blew up, everything looked like Adventure Time
Right.
with like it's just absolute bonkers, like stoned out of your mind look. And there's some elements of that that are always going to like a big show is going to permeate the landscape in that way. And yeah, but I think Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, Owl House all have these like big, goofy. Gosh, I for some reason I keep thinking Beetle Bailey from the old serial comics. It was like a or Dagwood or like those characters where they have very rounded heads, like the top of their heads like a just a half dome, and then their cheeks bulb out in another dome, and their eyes are perfect egg ovals, like that sort of animation stuff really draws me in because I guess I've always that's just what I've always sort of grown up with, and that's pulled me out. And but yeah, it's good. I think what really works to the point of to probably some of the other artists who have enjoyed it and stuff like that is that it does a lot of fun whimsy, and it does moments of like serious, but like it's not serious in a ridiculous way. It's like what happened was had a lot of whimsy to it, but the reason I wanted it was this actually deeply personal reason. So like really good Saturday morning cartoons we grew up with where the quote unquote message or the through line was like something based on reality or, I don't want to fail. Who am I? These like deep things that people of a young age are wrestling with is now coded in this like wonderful, colorful whimsy that allows you to feel and think without the burden of overanalysis, really. And of course, with any great show, if you're like me, I own books from Gravity Falls, and I'm like digging through for all these little things. So of course, when you love something like that, you could really throw yourself into it and find the minutia. But if you're just in it for the ride, that's what's great about these shows too. Is it doesn't really put a lot of burden on you the way even like some animes I love where it's like, okay, I have to keep up with this, I have to keep up with these names, I have to keep up with this storyline. Whereas like, it doesn't feel that way for me for Owl House.
I'll put it on my short list. I consumed all of season 1 of Reacher on Prime Video last week and over the weekend. Over the weekend, it kind of built up the momentum, and I ended up finishing it. I thought I watched like 2 or 3 episodes on Saturday and 2 on Sunday, but I started like once a night, watching. There's like 8 episodes, I think, in the full season. Are you familiar at all with Jack Reacher as a character, because it's a series of books?
I knew it was a series of books, but no, all I know is that they had the Tom Cruise
Yeah,
films.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen the Tom Cruise film. It was a while ago, and I was surprised that they were bringing it to Prime. You normally when you see Tom Cruise in something like that's a franchise that like is just going to be stuck with him for the
Yeah.
you're just going to see more and more and more of them, like the Mission Impossible films. But what I was surprised when I started looking into this was that Jack Reacher is a character that was created by Lee Child, which is the pen name for Jim Grant, a British author. And there's something like 24 novels.
Ugh.
And they're all different titles and different adventures, but it all stars the same character. So it's like those crime, detective novels where it's the same,
Right.
protagonist throughout
Yeah.
each book. So the first season of Reacher on Prime Video is based on The Killing Floor, which is the first published novel of the Jack Reacher series, but it takes place like the fourth book in terms of the characters timeline. But it's the first published book, so they started with that one. And since then, I've actually watched an interview with Alan Ritchson, who stars as Reacher in the title role, on Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, which is kind of what sent me down that path.
Yeah.
Because if anybody that's watched Smallville is looking at Alan Ritchson like, I know this guy from somewhere, it's because he played Aquaman in Smallville.
Yep.
Like he played Arthur Curry, I think was the character's name.
Arthur Curry, yeah.
Yeah,
AC.
I know that's the character's name in the comics. So I was like, is that the name they gave him in Smallville? I couldn't remember.
Well, they call him AC because
Right.
we're cool high schoolers.
High school stuff. Yeah. But I remember, of course, him being like playing this cocky, Atlantean stuff in Smallville. Found out later through interviews that was his first real gig on Smallville, which makes sense because he's 38 or 39, and so that was 20 years ago. So he would have been just at high school, doing stuff. And I've seen him in other things. Like I've seen him in Titans. While I didn't necessarily enjoy all of Titans, him playing Hawk, Hank Hall, part of Hawk and Dove. Again, Hawk and Dove, stupid concept as a superhero thing in general. But but the way that he played Hawk, and the fact that like he's not a superhero, he just beats people up. Like he's just a house of muscle and beats the snot out of people. And Titans is a graphic show. Like so it's
right.
very visceral. Like when he's and he gets hurt too. And I think that's one of the reasons why I liked Hank Hall in that show is that he gets injured a lot because he's in very dire situations up against things and people and enemies that have superpowers. And so he ends up getting beaten up as much as he beats other people up and stuff. And they went a little bit adult with him in Titans because they go with like, he's got substance abuse problems and all this kind of stuff. But
well, yeah, he's on painkillers, so of course he gets addicted to them. So yeah, that was it was an interesting thing we don't see a lot. Yeah.
No, exactly. But anyway, back to Reacher. I really enjoyed Alan Ritchson and actually Willa Fitzgerald, his co-star, who plays Roscoe, in the show. He does a really different take, more than I was different than I was expecting. So to kind of set things up, I'll read like the summary, which is like just the kind of like the premise for the show. So Jack Reacher gets off a Greyhound bus in the fictional town of Margrave, Georgia, because he remembers his brother mentioning that a blues musician named Blind Blake died there. Much to his surprise, shortly after his arrival, he's arrested in a local diner for murder. He must try to prove his innocence. So in this particular situation, like you get off like that's the first 5 minutes of the series of him being arrested in this diner, not even being able to eat a piece of his peach pie, which ends up being kind of like a running gag throughout the series. And I'll let people know I'm not going to spoil anything. I won't talk about any plot points because I enjoyed it as a whole. At first I was like, this is kind of campy, but it's got an interesting premise and there's some good acting going on, so I'll see where it goes. Richardson is pretty stoic in the role, but that's Reacher. Like apparently, and this is from interviews that I've seen with Richardson, a lot of the dialogue or a lot of the premise from the book is like Reacher said nothing, and so you're just like you're stuck trying to act like how do I respond? In a situation where like he's supposed to like part of his response is the fact that he's staring at you and saying nothing.
Sounds like Witcher.
Yeah, you know what though? It very much is, and he has that kind of presence. He doesn't growl or anything like that, so that's good. He cracks some jokes here and there. He's very dry, but he's very matter of fact. Like obviously he's like a decorated military character, and like he's basically like imagine any 80s or 90s action films like Demolition Man, Commando, Under Siege. Like the fact that these guys are just too good to even exist, like in terms of their skill level. Like this is like the most elite of the elite. He was like a former military police investigator. Like he has all these credentials. And he's 6'2" and 235 pounds, and just like he's a
Yeah.
monster. He's a big man. Like that's actually Richardson's height and size too in this particular show. He did a lot of training to get up to that weight, and it works. Like there's just fun moments from like the trailer where like he removes, like they're talking about like finally releasing him from prison. They realize that he's not the murderer that they're looking for. I mean, his attitude and his like kind of aloofness doesn't help his case, right? Because he's kind of creepy, you know? And the people are
Yeah.
just like, well, we don't believe you. And he's like, I'm only going to help you if you allow these zip ties to come off because the cuffs wouldn't fit him, is basically the joke. And they're like, yeah, all right, fine, get the box cutter. He's like, no, it's fine. And he stands up and he just kind of flexes and breaks the zip tie. So basically
Yeah.
saying like, I was listening to you because I'm innocent and I don't want to cause a muss, but I basically could have gotten out of this at any point, you know? And it's
Yeah.
the kind of move where what's missing and what I'm glad is missing is the Schwarzenegger one-liners from the 80s are not
Yeah.
in this, but
Uh-huh.
there's that dry pause of like him just looking at you and the other character shaking their head, and in their head they're just thinking, oh, Reacher. And then that's it, and they move on. So it's got those moments, but it's not like Pun City or really kind of like obvious jokes and stuff like that. It's got really, if I was to criticize it, I'd say it has some very obvious archetypes. Like, you know immediately who the rich, smarmy kind of like kingpin is in this southern town, right?
Yeah.
The sweet talking, dressed in a suit with a walking stick, kind of like, you know who the bad guys are immediately, because they're the ones that sound like politicians.
Yeah.
It's really kind of easy to spot. Not that there aren't some twists. I also found the role of KJ, played by Chris Webster. I mean, he did a good job for the role that was written for him, but he is just straight up creepy douchebag from moment one. Think Biff from Back to the Future.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
just
Yeah.
he has one note, and it is, you want to punch me in the face. Like that's every time he opens his mouth, you're just ready to just smoke the guy. And
Yeah.
Reacher is too, by the way. And that ends up being, like a through point for the series as well. But I found that those moments didn't really get redeemed. Like, I feel like they did such a good job of bringing Reacher up as a force to be reckoned with that they didn't really give him enough cerebral bad guys. They send him up against like a bunch of like, Colombian, I don't know whether they're drug lords or like they're ex-military, and they're in this small town and they're murdering people and doing terrible things. And he's up against like, so his military training and his like, there are no rules that apply to me sort of like tactics in a police investigation come to his strength and why he doesn't die, because he can do all this kind of stuff. And that's viable. But then he's much smarter than the actual bad guys in the show. And I feel like they could have done with a much more intimidating antagonist. Yeah, like they needed a little bit of a beefier villain. I will say, and I hope this doesn't ruin it for people, but I really did not enjoy Oscar Finley, who is the chief of police or the chief investigator, played by Malcolm Goodwin. I don't know whether it was direction, writing. I know they had to stay true to the books. There's a lot of people that fans that weren't happy with the Tom Cruise movie, and so they wanted to stay really true to the books. And you can feel that the books were written a long time ago. Killing Floor came out in 1997. And so it feels like 1997 with some of the situations in the dialogue, but then they've updated it for like, they've got cell phones and, internet searches and satellite and all, like they've got all the kind of future tech, but they don't,
Yeah.
the way that characters are written and interact feel sort of stereotypical of 80s and 90s action films. And Finley feels like a caricature. And again, I don't want to insult anybody, but I feel like Finley, the character as you see it in Reacher, would have been perfect for a Harvard grad detective on a show like How I Met Your Mother or Friends, or maybe not a comedy, but like television, like drama characterization, a
Right.
caricature, does not work in an 8 episode single plot kind of like series that's got some real stakes. Like people are dying, people that you don't expect to die are dying. I mean, you kind of know that because there's 24 books that Jack Reacher's not going to die, but like you don't know who these people around him, and some of whom you care about. Like Willa Fitzgerald does a fantastic job with Roscoe.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
He's
she's not a damsel in distress. Can hold her own, doesn't need Reacher to protect her, but is thankful when he's around because she's up
yeah.
against some serious stuff with like these, I can't remember who they are. There's some South American bad guys that are not something that, the 4 cops on this Georgetown police force can handle. They
Yeah.
need like a Reacher and someone that's not out, like that is outside the law to kind of help with that. Um, and you do get a lot of those cool vibes when like they're together. There's like that Lethal Weapon kind of like she jokes with him about being so freaking weird, but then she also, likes him because he's nice to her and he's honest. Like he's honest to the point where he blurts stuff out socially. I feel like Richardson almost played him a little bit on the autism spectrum. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that because he's just so highly intelligent and so socially removed because of his military training and his experience. He has that kind of like, like someone says like, whatever you
Mhm.
do, could you just not kill anybody? Try not to be arrested and thrown in jail today. And he'll just be like, no, and walk away. Like he just straight up,
Yeah.
I'm not making a promise that I can't keep, so I'm just going to answer you straight. You know,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
he's looking at police officers and she's like, look, I'm going to go kill these guys. And so you need to go this and this so that more people don't die. And they're sitting there going like, he just told us that he's going to go kill people. Like
Yeah.
normally we would have to like arrest him, but we know we can't because like he would just get away. Like, it's just,
Yeah, exactly.
so
Yeah.
there's a bit of a like MacGyver stuff going on there, but I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I've recommended it to my buddy Chad. I think you would enjoy it. It's obviously very graphic and like there's some high stakes, so it's not a show you want to have on when there's small people around. Um, they don't go over the top with the swearing. There's some, but it's not like it's not unintelligent. People swear when they're being shot at, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that, which I thought was cool. But like I really enjoyed it. I was surprised. I went into it thinking like, oh, is this going to be like just another crime procedural? And it's not. They've taken it somewhere different. It's very physical. You kind of roll your eyes sometimes at the weird situations where Reacher is like cornered by a bad guy and he has to kill them with their own shoe or something. But it's just at the same time, you're just kind of like, well, I mean, like he's gonna use what he's got. Like if it means smashing your head through the wall, then that's what's gonna happen. Like it just, what I find so interesting is that you'd be watching a fight scene, the other guy's got a knife and Reacher like takes his belt off and uses the belt as like a defensive weapon. And
Right.
then there's a twist in like the scene and he ends up killing them with like the telephone or or
Yeah.
just something random that you just did not expect. And that is it's weird. It almost makes you like in a certain way it makes me feel like a little targeted as like a 40-year-old male viewer. Like, this is what you want. You want guns and fist fights and, and one-liners. And like, we know what you want. But I'm sitting there going like, yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. Like, it's worth checking out. And if you don't like the first 2 episodes, you probably won't like the rest. But I will say that it does not remain as predictable as you think, which I think is good. It speaks to its strength in that light.
It based it enough. I will say that the new trend of, I mean, going back to like True Blood, they did this, but like when they would take a season from a book or take a book and break it down into a season of long running books like that, I always found that a little bit better because then the through line for the season was well tested, well trot, laid out. and if they need to, they can borrow some content from a long running series or do what they have to do. So I always think that that's nice because, and again, either the series is done or they're so far in the future that they're not like begging George R. R. Martin to like figure something out so that they'll have a season 9 or something. Like if there's that many books, some of these like Wheel of Time, Reacher, you know Jack Ryan, some of these things where it's like, oh yeah, that person wrote at least 10. So 10 seasons of a TV show, even streaming, is long. So if they get there, great. But if not, hey, good news. We can pick and choose the ones we want. Like, that's good.
I hope they do that. Like, I hope they choose the books that would make the best adaptations,
Right.
and
Yeah.
not just go chronologically. I mean, for example, they didn't start at the beginning. They didn't start with the first story that that child wrote for Reacher. It's the first published book, but similar to Star Wars, like episode 4 was the one that got made into a movie, right?
Yeah.
Not episode 1. And so I
Yeah.
feel like they've started with a strong vibe. And again, like there's a certain comfort to stranger walks into southern town. No one likes him. Everybody's got their eyebrow cocked when he walks by. Cause again, like he's a wall of muscle. So like you can't miss this dude. It has that kind of like fish out of water Schwarzenegger vibe in all of his
Mhm.
films. When he walks into a room, everybody kind of goes, good Lord, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I feel like it's got that kind of vibe, but then it also has that familiarity of those kind of films, whether or not they're action films or not. Like, I mean, The Notebook, City Girl goes to Southern Town for the summer, like just that kind of fish out of water
Right.
story where
Yeah.
you really feel the hostility of one of the main characters being an outsider in that environment. And a lot of people can identify with that. So when you get down to the brass tacks of it, like there are some just social, we'll say not memes, but like social situations that a lot of people can identify with, despite the fact that you're not like a trained military killer, like
Right.
on a
Yeah.
personal level, they did a good job with Roscoe's like ties to the community. Like you're like, once you realize that she's as intelligent as she is and as well trained as she is, you're like, why the hell are you in this town? And she
Yeah.
later on and again, they don't give you this in a monologue. They give it to you over time in the series, which is great. And you realize that she's got family ties. Like her family has been around as long as the town has, and that's why she hasn't left, is because she feels like there's hope for this town, and she as a police officer is hoping that she can affect change for good, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because there's moments when she as a police officer is just like, she can be on a first name basis when she's like arresting someone. She's like, God damn it, Jimmy, could you just like
Yeah.
give me a
Exactly.
break, listen to me
Yeah.
for once. It's that kind of a stuff. She knows everybody, so that kind of stuff it makes the series feel familiar even though it's brand new to you, which I think is good. Moving on into the Internet Minute, which is, of course, brought to you by you. The Citadel Cafe is 100% listener supported. If you've been getting value out of the show, please consider putting a little bit of value back in. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level will get you an invite to the member-only Discord server, as well as access to other benefits, including website credit thanks and bonus episodes, all depending on what level you choose to support at. Patron count is at 25. I checked that this morning. That is steady on from last week. If you'd like to be patron number 26, visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. I'll keep these short and sweet. More Lego. Lego is just knocking it out of the park these days with new stuff. The Mandalorian's N1 Starfighter set 75325 is available for pre-order. It's not out yet, but you can pre-order it. It is $80 Canadian, 412 pieces, which is surprisingly low on the play count. But it is a large ship. It's 16.5 inches long, 11.5 inches wide, and about 2.5 inches tall. That's pretty standard for ships. They're not very tall. They're usually like wide and flat.
Right.
The
Yeah.
minifigs that come along with it are Din Djarin with the Darksaber, Grogu, Pili-Motto, and the BD droid all come along with the set. Looks pretty cool. Doesn't look like a lot has changed since the most recent rendition of the N1 Naboo Starfighter. They've just kind of changed some of the colors, some of the plating. I wish they had a little bit more color in the design in general, not faulting Lego, but I think the show could have used a
The
little bit of
show,
a
yeah.
splash of color on the ship.
Agreed.
It has a little bit of dinged paint, but you have more detail in the show because like the engine is more detailed. There's more kind of like parts, I think, happening. I recently built a Lego Y-Wing, which is a minifig scale model, and there's a lot of detail in that I thought was really cool, and that looks like it might be a little bit missing from this particular Lego model. So I don't know whether they just maybe rushed this out a bit, but I mean, it looks cool. I don't know if it's up there with the $80 price tag, but we'll see.
Yeah.
The other two are quick hits. We've got Brickhead's Buzz Lightyear set 4522 and the Demogorgon and 11 from Stranger Things, which is set 40549. And I mean, Buzz Lightyear looks like Buzz Lightyear. It's a Brickheads thing. It's just fun. It's 114 pieces. All of the Brickheads stand about 3.5 inches tall. But the Demogorgon, yeah, the Demogorgon and 11, it's a little bit more expensive. Buzz Lightyear is 13 Canadian. The Demogorgon and 11 is 25 Canadian, and it's almost 200 pieces. But the face pedals on the Demogorgon are particularly funny because the brickheads all kind of stand very stiff. Like their arms are usually like directly down by their sides. And then the Demogorgon has these like giant face pedal things on Lego hinges. And it's very specific. And the teeth are like repurposed horns from like Ninjago sets and stuff. Like it's very whimsical of a thing that's not whimsical at all.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was worth mentioning. So these are all fun Lego picks that you can check out. I think really the one that stands out to me is the N1 Starfighter. It's cool to see that in Lego sets. That wraps up this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can get more information about the show and links to some of the things that Brockett and I talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and you can email us at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com. Find the show by name on Twitter. Subscribe for free on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, even YouTube. Word of mouth is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Citadel Cafe and where they can go to listen to it. While you're out there, leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening. That kind of stuff just goes a long way to get the podcast into the ear holes of new listeners. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything I am doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio at joelduggan.com. You can check out my other podcast all about Minecraft at thespawnchunks.com. This coming Monday, we are going to be interviewing Sliced Lime, who is the tech lead at Mojang on Minecraft. So that's going to be a lot of fun. You can, of course, follow me on social media at Joel Duggan and twitch.tv/Joel Duggan, where I've been playing Minecraft every weekend. Come on by. Brockett, where can people find you online?
You can find me at the Catvolver on all the social media that matters. Meow, meow, meow.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.